Mostly just because it's fun. I enjoy it for two different reasons. There's two different parts of me that really like helping to build and scale e-commerce businesses and SaaS businesses. One is I like helping people, but the other part of it is just also I'm a complete nerd. Driving to work one day, I memorized pi out to 59 digits just for the fun of it. And within growing something from an advertising perspective, there's a lot of different metrics, a lot of different numbers. And I think sometimes people get stuck on maybe just a couple of these KPIs and they don't know how to dig deeper into those. But it's a really complex math problem. And I think that's fun. I like digging into it. I didn't actually set out to build an agency. When I started this, I was just a guy who had done a lot of really great things in the marketing world for a couple of businesses and was writing about it on Entrepreneur and Fast Company. And people said, hey, can you help me grow my business? Can you help me grow my business? And going back to that first question, I like helping people. So I wanted to find a way. And so I started putting pieces together and helping people. And then it was like, oh, I guess I have an agency now. So then when I took that full time, I was still just kind of piecing out what that was, but I wasn't aware that agencies even needed to be disrupted or rethought a little bit. How do you scale it? I think it comes down to just doing great work. If you start doing those things, then you don't have churn, right? Customer churn. So now every time that you add on something new, something incremental, you just continue to grow and scale from there. In fact, we get our biggest growth from our current clients. The average of all of our clients' growth in November of 2020, year over year, it was about 280%. That was the average. And some of these are, customers that went from selling 2 million a month to 10 million a month. When that's what you're doing, you don't actually need to go out and source new business as much. You just focus on the ones that you have, do really great work for them, and by default, you end up growing. Going back to the question before, it's great work. Sustainability is based on the idea of something being stable even when it gets shaken. So if you're in e-commerce, that's, your products have to live up to the hype of what you're saying. Your shipping, shipping needs to be on time, your customer service, all of those need to line up and they need to affirm the positioning that you've taken in the market. The thing I think that's important to remember is that you will have problems. Things will be shaky. We will go through pandemics or whatever, or recessions. Those things will happen. And if you've set up a system that's stable, that's not based on overhype, you can usually find ways to ride through that, and you'll have a loyal base of customers who will realize and understand that and stick with you through those hiccups. So it comes down to just doing great work or having great products or doing the right thing. So it's an old answer, but let's look at it from like awareness, consideration, and decision, that funnel, right? First, they have to be aware that you exist. So if they're just aware that you exist and that you're just like everybody else, that's not helpful either, right? So it's the right kind of awareness, and being aware that you exist and that you are different and what makes you different is important. And creating that intrigue to get them to that next step. But then when we go to the decision part, getting them to convert, it's that idea of, have you actually conveyed that value? It's amazing how many times I will land on an e-commerce website and they've done so much work to get the customer there and their ads are amazing and exciting and fun. And you get to the website and the product page is meh, right? There's not even a word for it, it's just meh. And you look at this and there's no video about the product, barely an explanation about it. The explanation looks like it was, written by the factory, not by somebody who's actually going to use the product. You haven't conveyed the value now of that. You haven't conveyed what's in it, like that emotional response. And when you get to that product page, make sure that that is what's being conveyed, that they understand why, what's in it for them beyond just buying a product. On our side, we're focused a lot more on growth for businesses because we do the advertising, the SEO, the growth side of things. So when we're looking at growth, one of the biggest metrics, at least in the advertising space, is ROAS. And I don't dislike it. I don't love it. I don't dislike it. It has a place, but it can also be very limited. And so I'd say, let's look beyond just basic ROAS, return on ad spend. Let's look at MER. media efficiency rate, total revenue divided by total ad spend. There's a lot of times where people get hung up, let's say, on just the in-platform numbers, but those are all numbers that are based on algorithmic data, right? It's Google could take credit for it, Facebook could take credit for it, your email platform's taking credit for it, and it's only still one sale, but they all took credit for it. Whereas MER is going to kind of like, let's wipe the slate clean and just say, are you profitable overall? What's the holistic nature of what you're doing? Then keep investing in it, even just as a whole, right? But the other one that I really like to look at then too is LTV to CAC ratio. It's something that I borrowed from the SaaS world, wasn't maybe used as a ton in e-commerce, but I think it holds a lot more value sometimes in looking at just straight ROAS. There's a different amount that you're willing to pay for a new customer than that you're willing to pay for somebody who's already your customer. People need to be aware of you, but that awareness, if they're just aware that you're just like everybody else, then they're just aware that they don't want to do business with you necessarily, right? So it's the right kind of awareness, but being able to create that awareness in a way that's different, I think that's the key. And I think part of that comes down to one of the easiest ways people do this is founder stories. Every single founder is a unique individual. Their story is going to be different. Their reason and their inspiration for creating the business, there was a reason why you decided to do this. And a lot of times people can just align with you and your reason for starting that business. That's a great place to kind of start that, to start sounding a little bit different from everybody else. In e-commerce, I'd say the challenges are the opposite of what maybe a lot of people have faced. So there are a lot of people, local business, have faced struggles of people not being able to come to their store, being shut down, and that's a massive challenge. But on the e-commerce side, it's the opposite, where for the most part, e-commerce grew significantly, and the challenge there was keeping up with the growth. So keeping up with inventory when maybe you can't get the inventory across the sea. You actually don't want to spend as much on advertising knowing that you're going to stock out in about 45 days, right? So thinking ahead of where that stock is going to run out rather than reducing your ad spend once you've run out. So looking at that from an inventory planning and advertising perspective. And then the other one then would be, customer service again and shipping. So I think the biggest challenge from the e-commerce perspective is moderating that growth, making sure you don't grow too quickly, and making sure that as you scale up advertising and growth related activities, that you're also maintaining that effectiveness on the back end side of things as well. So again, e-commerce for the most part is not struggling right now. If you are struggling though in e-commerce during this time when e-commerce as a whole is seeing a massive surge, then you have to look at this and say there's a mismatch somewhere. Often that could mean that maybe you're not saying the right things, you're not differentiating enough. The other part of that though is maybe you are saying the right things, but you're not saying it to the right audience. But something there isn't aligned, and trying to figure out where that is, and then how do you tell that story? And so sometimes it comes down to maybe you need to do a user focus group, or have you sent out any surveys to current customers? Are you asking people when they return stuff, why they're returning it, and go through and dig through that data? Maybe look at some of the comments that are on Facebook. You need to kind of dig back into that. That's more likely the issue than there is some kind of like a massive SEO issue or a massive advertising setup issue or something to that effect. It's usually going to be along the lines of like the story or the message or the connection to the right audience. As you grow, the need to have presence across several different channels is important, but I think it's less about having the exact same presence across all of the different channels and about finding new ways to show off your voice that is relevant to that platform. So I would say the goal then is being the same in essence. And by being the same in essence, that means that your positioning statement needs to come through on that platform. So if it's, that you're the best, or you save the most money with us, or whatever that positioning is, that should come through on that platform. But it should come through in the right way in that medium. And so I think about like an artist, right? Let's say that you're a clean line artist, you're a minimalist. Well, whether you're working with crayon on construction paper, or it's digital, or it's painting a wall in your house. That minimalism, that approach, that aesthetic should translate through all of those different mediums. The same is true for you as a business. It's that essence of what it is that you're communicating, but the way that you do it across all of those different channels should be different. It should represent that platform well. There's probably two that I absolutely love and feel like I probably couldn't live without. And that's gonna be Asana and Notion. And that's because they're the backbone of what we do. That is the organization, what keeps things running and moving forward at the same time in the same way. Asana then for project management and tasks. So that way, when something comes through, how do we know who's doing it, when they're doing it? Are there other dependencies? What's going on? How does it fit with everything else we're doing? Can we get it done in that amount of time frame? And then Notion for organizing a lot more complex type stuff. So, our processes and how things are going to get done and why and when and how. Those two tools, I feel like I probably couldn't live without. One of the people that I look up to the most right now is David Mortensen. He is the co-founder of Anytime Fitness, which is, I believe, still considered the largest gym franchise in the entire world. And the reason why I really appreciate talking to him is he has a way of keeping my problems light. I remember there was a moment when I was talking to him about a problem that I was running through with the agency. And to me, it felt like a pretty big, serious problem. And he starts laughing. Full on belly laughing at me, nearly falling off the couch laughing, right? And initially you're like, wait, what? And you can't help but start laughing yourself. And it's in those moments that I think you can realize that the problem is not as big as you think it is. It feels like it is, but when you're talking to somebody who's been there, done that, experienced those types of problems, it's funny to them in the right way because they get it. He also just gives me a lot of other really great inspiration. There was a book he wrote called Love Work, and it's a book that really helps you understand how to build the type of company that you want to work for. The book goes into just a lot of really great examples of how to really set up a work environment that people enjoy being a part of. To the point where, in their case, they have even, customers and clients and staff members that will get tattoos of their logo. So how do you build a type of culture where people want to tattoo your logo permanently on their body? That's inspirational. The one book that has changed my life more than any other book that I read over and over again is the Bible. Let's look at it from a marketing perspective. The book has a ton of really great context into psychology, the human mind, the way things work, and why we do some of the things we do, or how we think about things, and what that means, and how we're going to make decisions. I would have to say, hands down, the best advice is focus. I realized that when I started this agency, and even many other previous jobs, the key to being able to find that success is being able to say, this is the roadmap, I'm going to go after it. But if you change directions every couple of steps, you might not get very far, right? And I think that's true. You talk to people who are successful at anything, their workout plan. And the majority of people will say, there's not a huge secret to it. It's the fact that just do it. And so I think focus is probably the best advice that I've ever received. Oh man, the future of e-commerce it's wild, right? On the e-commerce side, we're already seeing this where going to a physical store is less important. And we already were seeing that before we went into this pandemic where you couldn't go into it. We're seeing it even more now. What I do think though is there is still sometimes an appreciation for in-person events. So I think there's an element and a place for that in-person experience from a commerce perspective as well. But it might not be the traditional way that we're used to looking at it as, aisles and aisles of stuff. And then that brings me into the AR, VR experience. Again, going back to getting away from a lot of to go to some of these places to experience it. I think we are going to see more rich environments for testing and seeing and using products in AR and VR. And we're seeing a bit of it now, and a lot of it's mostly gimmicky. But I think that it's going to get more and more that way, where you really will feel like you can experience the product that you're buying or the service that you're buying very richly there. And then the final piece of that is that just more and more purchases of digital stuff, right? So we're seeing NFT is really kind of skyrocketing right now. So I think that we're going to continue to see more and more of those types of digital transactions that are truly have no need to ever have physical presence or physical goods at all, but still convey the same thing that we're trying to get out of a lot of physical products, which is this idea of aligning with who we are, right? We're looking at this idea of, who are we in our identity? And as more of our identity does merge into this online world, more money will be spent on that online identity as well. Some of the things that I've learned about myself from running this is that be stronger than you think you are. Running a business is just really freaking hard. And you hear people say that all the time until you experience it. And all of the ways that there's going to be pushback against continuing down that path of, working sometimes weeks that are 100 hours a week as you're trying to work and grow and scale. You can't quite hire this yet. And there's a lot of different reasons. And so then you've got maybe social pressure of, you work too much and, just, I guess, being completely real. It's like, yeah, there are days that I'll break down and cry about it, right? Like you wake up and just like, man, like I'm tired. But I think it's that idea of, it's like that resolve. And you never know if you really truly have it, right? You think maybe you do. You're like, no, I can do it. I can, go all through all of this and do that. But until you go through it, I think you're never quite sure. But being through this now, and this is, I think, our 6th year, and having ridden through a lot of those storms, realizing that it's like, yeah, I can do it. I can keep pushing and keep going. I think that's probably the thing that I'm the most excited about seeing is that validation of keep going. You got it. You can do this. Don't give up.